a nerd fight here, man.
Oh, yeah, well,
Okay, we're all set?
my computer.
Okay. All right, so the whole thing about my talk is basically a lot of people see my laptop and my desktop and how things are set up and say, how did you do that? How do I make things look that way? So this whole talk is basically how I've made my laptop look the way it does. Tremendous amount of waste of time, much like compiling Gen 2 endlessly, but I like my desktop to look pretty. What we're going to cover, terminal, various things on the desktop, how to use and create your own applets, which is a lot easier than you'd think. Terminals, the three that I like as far as cosmetically, aterm, eterm, and console. The reason I like those three is they do pseudo-transparency, which I happen to like a lot, which is these, fake transparent terms. They just take the background, they grab a chunk of it, throw it in the background of the term. If you throw anything behind that term, you don't see it. It's not really transparent. It just pretends like it is. They vary in their features. That's what I covered. Console and eterm do a lot more than aterm does. Aterm's really basic, and it's actually the one that I'm running now because the only feature out of all those that I actually like to use a lot is the pseudo-transparency. And it's easy to get them all to hide a lot of the extra decorations. That's aterm, kind of fuzzying out of resolution. That is a much better picture of it. eterm has a lot of features in there. It's got its own set of custom backgrounds. It's got a thing called, I believe, porthole, where you can basically, as you move it around the desktop, the background that is in it changes based on it's like it's doing the pseudo-transparency with an image that's not actually on your desktop. So as you move your terminal around, the image changes in relation to where the terminal's at, but it's not actually your background. I don't use that. I don't use a lot of it. I mean, it's neat that it's there, but I just don't think it's that aesthetically pleasing for the most part. Console can be very pretty. When I'm in KDE, I always run console, and this makes the most sense. It doesn't make a lot of sense to run it when you're not in KDE, so that's why I don't run it in Fluxbox. It does the same stuff I like to do with aterm and with eterm. It's also easy to hide all of the window decorations in KDE, which is what you have there, and which is what I have with these over here. As far as where to get good wallpaper, themes, icon sets for the different desktops, these are the three sites that I recommend. Basically everything I have came from one of these three sites if I didn't make it myself. And again, just because it says KDE look or GNOME look, a lot of it's wallpaper. Wallpaper for one is going to work on the other. I mean, it's just wallpaper, much like it's going to work in Fluxbox. A lot of the icons and things, even though they're intended for KDE or GNOME, you can use them in Fluxbox. You can use them one of the others. These aren't complicated things. It's not like you're necessarily bound by they intended it for KDE. The window manager I prefer the most is Fluxbox. There's a few issues with it. One of them is it doesn't have the ability to set its own background. So all the stuff that comes in Fluxbox by default is really, I should say, it doesn't have the ability to set its own background. It can't set its own wallpaper. It can do just like a solid color. So all the default stuff is really boring. It's just like flat black, flat blue, nothing really exciting. To get it to set actual wallpaper, you have to install something else that can do that. EsetRoot is part of eterm. There's, I believe, HSetRoot. There's a few other things out there. Either EsetRoot or HSetRoot will do what you need, which is let Fluxbox set a background. It's got a tool called FBSetBG Fluxbox, set background. All it does is looks around and sees, is there anything out there that can actually set wallpaper? And if there is, cool, I'll let you set wallpaper. So you can use that command and it abstracts that away, but it doesn't do anything on its own. If you're running KDE, you're running GNOME, obviously it can set wallpaper on its own. That is what my desktop generally looks like. There's a lot going on. Random wallpaper I pulled off of DeviantArt, I think. Bunch of transparent A terms. Transparent and with the window decorations turned off, which is a nice thing in Fluxbox. And I didn't put a slide in here for that. If you're using Fluxbox, all your configs are in .fluxbox, and there's a file in there called keys. What you want to do if you want to change your window decorations, there is an entry in here. You'll notice mod 1 F12. Mod 1 by default is almost always going to be your alt key. And you notice all the entries in here for the most part are using mod 1. It's not necessarily the case, and you can map it to whatever you want, but it's probably going to be alt. So what I'm doing here, I'm saying if you hit alt and F12, toggle decor. And toggle decor means that. Taking the title bar, the little border, there's not much in this theme I have, but the little bit of border there is, that all goes away. In the background, I've got a little thing called Roottail running, which is an utter total waste of time. You could do the same thing with tail-f. This just is prettier. Either way it accomplishes the same thing. Running your logs on the back of your screen if there's things you like to monitor. Most of what I monitor really isn't that important anyways, but I just like knowing what's going on my laptop. Roottail, it's root-tail. There's a few different versions. They all do the same thing. Very simple to compile. Or just take one of these terminals and run it fully transparent and run tail-f in it with the logs. It'll look the same just without the color. Same results really. What I also have here, another thing a lot of people ask me about, the gcrellum that I run to monitor things on the left-hand side here. That's a theme called ClearElm, and it does what it sounds like. It just provides a clear theme for gcrellum. It looks a lot better than the ones that come with it. A lot of people don't bother to skin or to get themes or anything for gcrellum. It's really ugly if you don't. So, I have, it can look a lot different than it actually does by default. The ClearElm has a few different colors. So a lot of people don't know that gcrellum can actually not look like utter crap. Another neat thing about it, there's actual modules you can get for gcrellum. That looks kind of ugly. Back then you loaded. It has its own plugins basically. You can have plugins that go into gcrellum that let you run XMMS from it, that let you view your Wi-Fi status, things like that. And those can come in handy. It's really full featured, just a lot of people don't necessarily take advantage of that. Fluxbox icons. This is another thing a lot of people don't know about. The themes don't use it by default, but Fluxbox can stick icons in the menus. And that's a little screenshot of that. There are scripts out there that will do this for you, notably Gentoo. Gentoo has something that will generate your Fluxbox menu for you, generate icons and all that stuff. I just don't really trust tools like that to know what programs I want in my menu, so I do it myself. If you want to add these to your menu yourself, that is, again, in the .fluxbox directory, there is a menu entry, and you add a line like this, and that's a lot easier to read. Probably I can bring up, okay, and then you'll notice all these entries where you see icons. You see that first entry, eTerm, and actually it's kind of run on line. That's the Firefox line. The second line there, Firefox, little Firefox logo. then you see the second line there. At the very end, there's a path to where the icon is at. I don't recall there being a whole lot of restrictions on the icons. I think they might have had to be 256 colors at the most. They've got to be XPM files. And I've stolen icons out of lots of other desktop environments and window managers. Things were meant for KDE or GNOME or XFC or whatever. They will work just fine in Fluxbox. They're just, they're going to be smaller. Great big icons aren't going to fit into that menu. Desktop epaulets. This is another really cool thing. There are lots of things like this out there. You got dock apps, Super Karamba themes, G-Desklets, A-Desklets. They are all basically different ways of doing the same thing. The Window Maker dock apps are what I have running on the top of gcrellum there. gcrellum actually runs in Fluxbox. It has a thing called the slit, which is kind of a legacy thing they took out of Window Maker. That's this whole bar that I've got on the left side of the screen. You can move it around. You dock things in it. I've docked gcrellum in it. And then these dock apps, that's where they get their name. They are docked into the bar on the side of the screen. The top one there, that tells me about the status of my wireless, which apparently I'm not associated with anything. The little bar at the bottom is a signal. The right above it is my MAC address. Very handy. Rather than bothering to run ifconfig or iwconfig, I can just look and I can see what my IP is, what my gateway is, all that good stuff. And then just below it, this it tells me the weather. You click on it and it'll tell me more specifically what the weather is. Yes, it looks very ghetto. It looks, like old stuff. But it works well in Fluxbox, and it works well in Window Maker, anything that uses a slit where you can put dock apps in it. The thing about dock apps, if you're interested in doing this, writing your own, they really suck to write. I never actually bothered to do it because when I looked into it, I saw I'd have to write a few hundred lines of C just to have boilerplate to make anything on the screen. If you're a programmer, that's probably trivial. I'm not, so I would rather do something a lot easier, which ended up being Super Karamba. So your mileage may vary. If you are a programmer, you might like these a lot, and they are lightweight and they work really well in lightweight window managers like Window Maker, Blackbox, Fluxbox, Lightmint, anything that supports Window Maker applets. And dockapps.org is really full of lots and lots of dock apps that will do pretty much anything you could think of. A-Desklets, like most of the other desktop applets, they're written in Python. A-Desklets use imlib2, which is used by eterm and esetroot. So if you already have eterm on your system, you're already using this library, so it's not a new dependency for you. They're also relatively lightweight. That's one of the things they're aiming for, is something that is very lightweight. The problem with these, there's not really that many of them. It seems really interesting, neat stuff, but if there's not one that does what I want, it's not that cool for me unless I want to write my own. G-Desklets, on the other end, there's a ton of. They were targeted for GNOME, obviously, for the name, but they're really pretty platform neutral. You don't have to run them in GNOME. There's no heavy dependencies there, and they are also written in Python. And that URL was on a couple sites back. It's like gdesklets.org, I think. The Super Karamba themes were the ones that were the most attractive to me because I do run KDE on my desktop, which already has all the libraries for this loaded. And there's a ton of these out there on kdelook.org and on Super Karamba's own website. They're written in Python, and they're really easy to create your own, which is what I wanted to do. I looked at all these and I found that basically this was really easy. I wrote a theme in like 20 lines of code, and I wouldn't even really call it code. That's kind of a stretch, as opposed to 200 or 300 lines of C for a dock app. That is all of the code I uncommented.